The skies above Vesha Prime blazed with chaotic fire as enemy ships swarmed like locusts. Explosions tore through the floating cities, sending debris spiraling down toward the lush plains below. Sirens blared throughout the capital, their shrill wail almost drowned out by the crashing of collapsing spires. The Yara'th Horde had arrived, a force of destruction with no interest in diplomacy or conquest, only annihilation. Inside the Vishari Council chamber, the air was thick with fear and disbelief. The council, composed of pale, luminescent beings with shimmering, translucent skin, debated furiously, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with distress. They had spent millennia pursuing knowledge, not war. Their libraries held the secrets of countless worlds, but their defenses were pitifully inadequate against the monstrous Yara'th. High Counselor Mirla stood at the center of the chamber, her glow dimmed by exhaustion. "We have sent distress signals to every known ally in the sector," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of the hopeless. "But no one has answered. Perhaps they think we are already lost." Councillor Tovan muttered, his glow fading to a dull grey. "Or perhaps they fear drawing the Horde's attention to themselves." Mirla looked toward the great star map projected above them, showing the nearby systems slowly going dark one by one as the Yara'th devoured them. Their neighbors had gone silent, abandoning them. Alone in the cold void of space, the Vishari felt the enormity of their impending extinction settle heavily over their hearts. An aide rushed into the chamber, panting. "The planetary shields won't hold much longer, Counselor. The Yara'th are breaking through." Mirla clenched her hands. "Then we have only one option left," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. She glanced around at the remaining councillors. "We send the signal, every frequency, every channel. We call for help from anyone out there, no matter who or what they are. We have nothing left to lose." A wave of uncomfortable murmurs spread across the chamber. Desperation hung thick in the air. Tovan frowned. "And if we summon someone worse than the Horde?" Mirla gave him a solemn look. "Then they will take our ashes instead of the Yara'th." There were no further objections. They had no choice. In the control room of the Vishari communications array, technicians worked furiously, directing the desperate plea across the stars. The message was simple, concise, coordinates, a brief explanation of the invasion, and a plea. "To any who can hear us, we are the Vishari, a peaceful people under attack. If there is anyone listening, we beg for your aid." The signal raced through space, passing through asteroid fields, abandoned stations, and ancient relay satellites. Systems far and wide received it, but, as with all previous pleas, no reply came. The council chamber fell silent as the hours dragged on. Despair thickened like a suffocating fog, and Mirla allowed herself to sink into the cold realization that they were truly alone. But far beyond the shattered remnants of their borders, on the edge of known space, something stirred. On board the USS Resolute, an Earth Alliance warship patrolling the frontier, alarms lit the bridge. A garbled message flashed across the holographic display, struggling to translate alien signals into readable text. Admiral Elena Voss leaned forward in her command chair, her sharp blue eyes scanning the broken transmission. The distorted image of a Vishari counselor flickered in and out, calling for aid amidst chaos. "Where did this come from?" Voss asked, her voice calm but commanding. "Uncharted sector," her comms officer responded. "Approximately 35 light-years from the nearest Federation border. Looks like a non-aligned system." Her second-in-command, Commander Marcus Kane, frowned. "A peaceful species calling for help against an unknown force. Sounds like a nightmare waiting to happen." "It could be a trap," another officer added cautiously. "Bait to draw us in." Voss folded her arms. She wasn't one for politics or overthinking things. She believed in doing what was right, even when the consequences were uncertain, and something about the plea stirred something deep within her. "What do we know about these Vishari?" she asked. "Not much," the comms officer admitted. "Explorers, scholars, no standing military to speak of. But the signal is genuine. They're out of time." Voss stared at the star chart displayed before her, calculating the journey. A quick jump to an unknown sector, far from any Earth Alliance outposts. It would take them dangerously close to the heart of uncharted space, where law and order held no sway. Her officers waited for her to make the call. She knew the risks. The Vishari might be beyond saving. It might already be too late. But Admiral Voss had made a career of trusting her gut, and her gut told her there were lives to save. "We've answered tougher calls," Voss said, her tone resolute. "Set a course. We're going in." The bridge crew jumped into action, the hum of engines building as they plotted the hyperspace jump. Voss watched as the view from the windows shifted, distant stars realigning as the Resolute prepared to punch through the void toward a battlefield they knew little about. Commander Kane raised a brow. "This could turn into an interstellar incident, you know." "Then let it," Voss replied. "We're not standing by while innocent people die." The command was given, and the ship's massive engines roared to life. Within moments, the Resolute disappeared into the starlit sea, streaking toward the unknown. On Vesha Prime, the ground trembled as alien ships carved through the upper atmosphere. Entire cities had fallen, reduced to nothing more than ash and rubble. Refugees packed the tunnels beneath the capital, their hope dwindling with every passing second. The Vishari defenders, untrained civilians and hastily armed scholars, fought with desperate resolve, but they were hopelessly outmatched by the merciless Yara'th. In the command bunker, Merla stared at the comm panel, waiting for any response to their signal. But the screen remained cold and silent. "Perhaps no one heard us," Tovan whispered, his voice trembling. "No," Merla whispered, refusing to give in to despair. "Someone will come. They have to." And then, just as all seemed lost, a blinking light appeared on the communication console. The Vishari technicians gasped. A signal. No, a reply. "It's coming from an unknown origin," the technician reported, eyes wide. "They're answering us." Merla's heart skipped. "Patch it through." The screen flickered to life, revealing the face of Admiral Voss, her expression calm but determined. "This is Admiral Elena Voss of the Earth Alliance, aboard the USS Resolute," the human said firmly. "We received your message. Hold on. We're on our way." For a moment, Merla could not speak. Relief washed over her, as if the weight of an entire planet had been lifted from her shoulders. Against all odds, someone had come. Not neighbors, not allies they had begged for help, but strangers from across the stars. And they had answered. As the Resolute tore through hyperspace, the battle on Vesha Prime reached its breaking point. The Yara'th hordes surged forward, their dark ships blotting out the skies. The defenders of Vishari were on the brink of collapse, but in the black void of space, a light shone. Humanity was coming, and with them, a glimmer of hope, one that would change the course of the galaxy forever. The USS Resolute dropped out of hyperspace in a dazzling burst of light, engines roaring as it materialized above the embattled planet of Vesha Prime. The scene before Admiral Voss and her crew was worse than they could have imagined. Entire cities were in ruins, their once beautiful architecture reduced to twisted metal and burning debris. Thousands of ships filled the sky, most of them belonging to the Yara'th Horde, a swarm of insectoid vessels weaving through the smoke-filled heavens like predators on the hunt. From the bridge of the Resolute, Voss took in the devastation with grim determination. The Vishari were barely holding on. Their defenses were crumbling, and refugee ships attempting to flee the planet were being torn apart by Yara'th fighters. "We're too late to stop the initial wave," Commander Kane muttered, scanning the tactical displays. "But if we act fast, we can still turn the tide." Voss gave a sharp nod. Bring us into defensive formation. Get our fighters launched, and put me through to the Veshari command center, now!" The Resolute rumbled as its automated turrets began firing at the encroaching enemy fleet, driving back the first wave of Yara'th fighters. Human fighters spilled from the ship's launch bays in tight, disciplined formations, engaging the alien ships with precision and fury. For every insectoid vessel destroyed, however, 2 more seemed to appear in its place. "Shields at 70%, an officer reported. "They're testing us." "Let them," Voss muttered. "We'll show them what they've walked into." Moments later, the communication link to the Veshari bunker was established, and the desperate face of High Counselor Mirla appeared on the bridge's main screen. Her glow was dim and flickering, a sign of her exhaustion and despair, but when she saw Voss standing tall and resolute, her expression softened with relief. "Admiral Voss," Mirla whispered, "you made it." "We're here," Voss confirmed, her voice calm, "and we're not leaving until these invaders are gone." Mirla's eyes shimmered with gratitude, though fear still lingered in her expression. "We've lost nearly everything, Admiral. Our defenses are shattered, and our people—" "We'll get them out," Voss interrupted gently. "I need you to stay with me. We'll coordinate evacuations from here." Mirla gave a shaky nod, clearly struggling to hold herself together. "Thank you. We thought no one would answer." Voss smiled, a flicker of warmth amid the tension. "That's not how we do things. When someone asks for help, we come." The connection ended, and Voss turned to her officers. "We need to buy them time to evacuate the civilians. Prepare the ground assault teams. If we're going to clear a path, it's going to take boots on the ground." Commander Kane raised an eyebrow. "You're deploying troops, ma'am? That's risky." "It's necessary," Voss replied. "The Veshari aren't soldiers. If we want to save their people, we need to fight alongside them." The command was given, and the Resolute shifted course, moving deeper into the chaos above Vesha Prime. Ground assault ships were prepped, their engines humming with anticipation as the Marines geared up for combat. They were the best Earth had to offer, veterans of a dozen conflicts, trained for the harshest conditions imaginable. In the ship's armory, Lieutenant Jack Riker adjusted his helmet and ran a hand over the sleek rifle strapped to his back. Around him, his squad checked their gear in silence, preparing for the mission ahead. These soldiers knew the stakes. Failure wasn't an option. "Ready to kick some alien ass, Lieutenant?" one of the Marines asked with a grin, tightening the straps on his armor. Riker smirked. "Always." In the cargo bay, the first dropship rumbled as its engines roared to life. The doors slid open to reveal the burning landscape of Veshar Prime below, a world teetering on the edge of destruction. "Touchdown in 60 seconds, the pilot called back to the squad. "Brace yourselves." The dropship lurched forward, diving toward the surface through clouds of smoke and fire. Alien fighters streaked across the sky, but the Resolute's fighters cleared a path, gunning down enemies with cold efficiency. Explosions rattled the dropship as they descended, each blast a reminder of how close death hovered. When the dropship hit the ground, the Marines stormed out with weapons raised. The once beautiful capital city was a battlefield now, littered with debris and crawling with Yara'th warriors, horrific creatures with segmented bodies, spiked limbs, and glowing eyes. They screeched as they charged toward the human soldiers, eager to tear into fresh prey. Riker's squad opened fire, plasma rounds lighting up the battlefield. The Yara'th were fast, but the Marines were faster, mowing down the insectoid creatures with ruthless precision. Every kill gave the Veshari defenders a little more breathing room, a little more hope. Back on the bridge of the Resolute, Voss monitored the battle unfolding below. "How are our Marines holding up?" she asked. "So far, so good," Kane reported. "They're clearing a path to the refugee tunnels." "Good." Voss turned her attention to the tactical displays. The enemy fleet was regrouping, their ships circling like vultures. We need to draw more of their forces away from the ground teams. Focus fire on their command vessels. The Resolute's weapon systems roared to life, unleashing a barrage of plasma torpedoes and energy blasts. The Yara'th fleet scattered under the assault, buying precious time for the Marines on the surface. Meanwhile, in the depths of the ruined city, Riker's squad fought their way through collapsing streets and crumbling buildings. Vashari civilians huddled in the shadows, too terrified to move, until the Marines arrived, offering protection and a chance at escape. "Come on," Riker urged, gesturing for them to follow. "We're getting you out of here." The Vashari refugees moved cautiously, their glowing forms flickering with uncertainty. They had never known war, never held a weapon. But now, with the Yara'th Horde closing in, they had no choice but to trust these strange, fierce humans who fought without fear. Riker's squad pushed deeper into the city, cutting down alien warriors with relentless precision. They reached the entrance to the refugee tunnels just as another wave of Yara'th soldiers swarmed the area, screeching with hunger. "Hold the line!" Riker barked, raising his rifle. "We're not leaving anyone behind!" The Marines formed a defensive perimeter, their weapons blazing as they held back the alien tide. Plasma rounds tore through the insectoid creatures, sending them crashing to the ground in heaps. But the Yara'th kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. Just as the Marines began to falter, the roar of engines filled the air. A second wave of dropships descended from the sky, unleashing reinforcements. The Marines cheered as more soldiers poured onto the battlefield, driving the Yara'th back with overwhelming force. With the enemy momentarily pushed back, the Vashari refugees rushed into the tunnels, guided by human soldiers. The Marines followed, sealing the entrance behind them to block the pursuing Yara'th. In the relative safety of the underground tunnels, Riker turned to the Vashari leader. "You'll be safe here," he promised. "We'll hold them off as long as it takes." The Vashari leader nodded, gratitude shimmering in her eyes. "Thank you. We owe you everything." Back on the Resolute, Voss watched as the evacuation progressed. It wasn't over yet, but they had made it this far. Against all odds, they were holding the line. "Admiral," Kane said quietly, "the Yara'th aren't going to stop. This is just the beginning." Voss nodded grimly. "I know, but if they think we're giving up, they've got another thing coming." The battle for Vesha Prime was far from over, but humanity had arrived, and they weren't leaving without a fight. The war over Vesha Prime intensified with every passing hour. The Yara'th fleet, seemingly endless in number, circled the planet like a swarm of ravenous locusts. On the surface, the Marines fought street by street, trying to buy time for the refugees to escape through the subterranean tunnels. But no matter how hard they hit the enemy, more alien soldiers kept coming. Admiral Voss stood on the Resolute's command bridge, her hands clasped behind her back, gazing at the tactical displays with steely determination. She knew their advantage was fragile. Every second they delayed the Yara'th Horde from advancing gave civilians a chance to escape. But the clock was ticking, and the enemy was relentless. "Status!" Voss demanded. "Fleet shields holding at 50%, Commander Kane replied grimly. "But the Yara'th are pressing hard. If we don't thin their numbers soon, they'll overwhelm us." Voss glanced at the enemy formation displayed on the main console, her mind racing. The enemy fought with ruthless coordination, their ships attacking in waves, while ground forces mirrored the strategy with wave after wave of warriors. The humans needed to break this deadly rhythm, and fast. "Send fighters to harass their supply lines," Voss ordered. "If we cut off their reinforcements, we might force them to pull back, and double the defensive perimeter around the tunnels." Kane nodded sharply, relaying the command to the fighter squadrons. Meanwhile, on the ground below, Lieutenant Jack Riker and his squad were waist-deep in battle. Blaster fire lit the streets as human Marines held their line, fending off Yara'th warriors that surged forward like a tidal wave. The alien creatures, with their chitinous armor and spiked limbs, screeched as they charged through the ruins of the city, eager to overrun the defenders. Riker crouched behind the burned-out remains of a transport vehicle, panting hard. His squad exchanged brief glances, their faces streaked with dirt and sweat. Even the most seasoned Marines looked shaken. They were fighting a monstrous enemy, one that seemed to thrive in the chaos of war. "How's the evac?" Riker shouted over the gunfire. A radio buzzed in his helmet, and a sergeant's voice crackled through. "We've got most civilians into the tunnels, but we're stretched thin, Lieutenant. They keep hitting us from all sides. It's like they know every move we make." Riker cursed under his breath. The Yara'th were too well coordinated for a mindless swarm. Something, or someone, was directing their assault with surgical precision, and unless they found a way to disrupt that command structure, the Marines wouldn't last much longer. "Hold this line!" Riker barked, rallying his troops. "We buy every second we can." He checked his ammo and peered over the cover. Alien warriors prowled the streets ahead, their insectoid bodies blending with the shadows. The Marines fired in controlled bursts, plasma bolts slamming into their enemies, but the creatures kept advancing, undeterred by their losses. Then, as if in answer to their prayers, a low roar filled the air, the distinctive hum of dropships descending from the sky. Reinforcements had arrived. Gunships soared overhead, unleashing torrents of fire on the alien ranks. The tide was beginning to turn, but even with the reinforcements, Riker knew the battle was far from over. They needed a way to break the enemy's coordination. Fast. Back on the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Voss studied the enemy fleet, her expression grim. Something wasn't adding up. The Yara'th were too precise, their attacks too coordinated. It was as if they were being guided by an unseen hand. "Commander Kane," Voss said, her voice sharp, "what do we know about the enemy's command structure?" Kane glanced at the data feeds, frowning. Yara'th intelligence indicates a central control nexus aboard one of their capital ships, but it's buried deep in the heart of their fleet. Voss narrowed her eyes. "If we take out that nexus, we cut off their coordination, correct?" "Correct, Admiral," Kane replied. "But their fleet is too dense. Getting close enough would be suicide." Voss's mind raced. They needed a plan, something bold and unexpected, something the Yara'th wouldn't see coming. "Patch me through to Lieutenant Riker," Voss ordered. Moments later, Riker's voice came through the comm system, breathless but steady. "Lieutenant Riker here, Ma'am." "Lieutenant, we've identified a command nexus aboard one of their capital ships. It's controlling their forces, both on the ground and in space. If we can destroy it, we'll disrupt their entire operation." Riker glanced at the chaotic battlefield around him, already guessing what was coming. "And you want us to sneak in there, don't you?" "Exactly," Voss confirmed. "It's risky, but if we pull it off, it could turn the tide of the battle." Riker grinned despite the odds. "You had me at risky." "What's the plan?" Voss laid out the mission, while the Resolute and the rest of the fleet launched a feint to draw the enemy's attention. Riker's team would slip behind enemy lines, infiltrate the command ship, and take out the Nexus. It was a long shot, but it was their best chance. As the ground assault ships prepared for the mission, Riker rallied his squad. The Marines exchanged determined looks, checking their gear and readying their weapons. They knew what was at stake. "Listen up," Riker said, addressing his team. "We're punching a hole through their lines, boarding that command ship and blowing it sky high. No hesitation, no second guessing. We go in hard, and we come out heroes." The Marines nodded, their expressions grim but resolute. They had been through hell together, and they weren't about to back down now. Above the planet, the Resolute's engines roared as it surged forward, leading the charge into the heart of the enemy fleet. Plasma cannons blazed, and torpedoes streaked through space as the ship punched through the Yara'th lines. Explosions lit the void, and enemy ships scattered in confusion, their formations crumbling under the sudden assault. The diversion worked perfectly. As the Resolute and its escorts drew the enemy's attention, Riker's dropship slipped through the chaos, weaving between enemy fighters and burning wreckage. "Almost there," the pilot called out, dodging a burst of enemy fire. "Hold on!" The dropship lurched as it hit the enemy ship's hull with a bone-jarring thud. Riker and his squad stormed out, weapons raised, charging through the corridors of the alien vessel. Inside, the Yara'th ship was a labyrinth of twisting corridors and pulsating walls. The Marines moved swiftly, cutting down any alien warriors that crossed their path. Every second counted. They needed to reach the command nexus before the enemy could regroup. As they neared the heart of the ship, Riker's squad encountered heavier resistance. Yara'th soldiers poured into the corridors, screeching in rage as they fought to defend their ship. Plasma fire filled the air, and explosions rocked the vessel, but the Marines pressed forward with ruthless efficiency. "Almost there!" Riker shouted, firing his rifle at a charging alien. "Keep moving!" Finally, they reached the Nexus chamber, a massive, pulsating core of alien technology. The room hummed with power, and alien glyphs glowed faintly along the walls. It was the brain of the Yara'th fleet, their coordination hub. "Plant the charges," Riker ordered, tossing explosive packs to his squad. The Marines worked quickly, setting charges around the core. Alarms blared as the Yara'th ship scrambled to respond, but it was too late. The countdown had already begun. "Time to go," Riker shouted, leading his team back toward the dropship. They sprinted through the alien corridors, plasma fire nipping at their heels. Just as they reached the airlock, the charges detonated. A deafening explosion tore through the ship, sending shockwaves rippling through space. The command nexus was destroyed, and with it, the Yara'th coordination collapsed. On the Resolute's bridge, Admiral Voss watched as the enemy fleet faltered. Yara'th ships veered off course, their movements disjointed and chaotic. The Marines on the ground reported the same. The alien warriors were retreating, their attacks losing focus. "That's it," Voss murmured, a fierce grin spreading across her face. "We've got them." The tide had turned. The Yara'th Horde, once a relentless force of destruction, was now a broken swarm, scattered and leaderless. Riker's dropship rocketed away from the crumbling command ship, narrowly escaping the explosion. "Mission accomplished," Riker radioed, grinning triumphantly. "See you on the other side, Admiral." Voss leaned back in her chair, relief washing over her. They had done it. Against impossible odds, they had held the line, and now they were winning. With the command nexus destroyed, chaos spread like wildfire among the Yara'th forces. On the ground, the once coordinated enemy assaults devolved into disorganized skirmishes, and in space, alien ships drifted out of formation, colliding with one another in the confusion. Admiral Voss seized the opportunity without hesitation. "All ships," Voss barked, her voice crackling over the fleet-wide comm channel. "Press the attack. This is our moment. Push them back. Drive them out of the system." The Resolute's engines roared as it surged forward, leading the charge. Plasma bolts and missiles streaked through the void, tearing into the disorganized Yara'th vessels. Human fighters swooped through the chaos, blasting apart enemy ships with ruthless precision. What had begun as a desperate defense was now a full-scale counter-offensive. On the surface of Veshar Prime, Lieutenant Riker and his Marines felt the shift in momentum. Where moments ago they were pinned down by overwhelming enemy forces, now the Yara'th warriors hesitated, their once coordinated attacks faltering. "They're falling apart," Riker shouted, rallying his squad. "Press forward. Don't give them a chance to regroup." The Marines advanced through the ruined streets, plasma rifles blazing. Yara'th warriors scattered before them, no longer moving in synchronized waves, but as scattered individuals, driven by instinct rather than strategy. The Marines fought with renewed vigor, knowing that victory was within reach. As the tide turned in their favor, Riker's team pushed toward the last known position of the refugees. They had one goal left: ensure every civilian made it safely to the tunnels and out of harm's way. Explosions echoed in the distance, and smoke filled the air as the Marines stormed through the shattered cityscape. "Evac point is just ahead," a sergeant shouted, pointing toward a crumbling building at the edge of the city. "Move! Move! Move!" The Marines charged toward the evac zone, ducking under collapsing structures and exchanging fire with the few remaining Yara'th soldiers. As they approached the tunnels, Riker spotted a group of civilians huddled near the entrance, their faces pale with fear. "You're safe now," Riker called out, waving them forward. "Get to the tunnels! Go!" The civilians scrambled toward safety, disappearing into the underground network. Riker and his squad held their position at the tunnel entrance, covering the escape with precision gunfire. In orbit, the battle raged on. Admiral Voss stood on the bridge of the Resolute, her eyes locked on the tactical display. The Yara'th fleet was unraveling before her eyes, their ships breaking formation and retreating in disarray. But Voss knew the fight wasn't over yet. "They're regrouping on the far side of the planet," Commander Kane reported. "They're trying to form a defensive perimeter." Voss clenched her fists. "Not on my watch. All ships, focus fire on their escape routes. Cut off their retreat and push them into the gravity well." The fleet responded with precision. Human warships closed in from all directions, forcing the Yara'th vessels into tighter and tighter formations. Fighters swarmed like hornets, picking off stragglers and leaving the enemy with nowhere to run. As the enemy fleet reeled, Voss spotted a gap in their defenses, a vulnerable point that could shatter their remaining cohesion. "Bring the Resolute to heading 229. We're cutting through their center." Kane's hands flew over the controls. "Aye, Admiral. Preparing for high-speed engagement." The Resolute surged forward, engines blazing as it barreled toward the heart of the enemy formation. Plasma cannons roared, and missile launchers unleashed a storm of firepower, ripping through the alien ships like paper. The enemy tried to mount a desperate defense, but it was too late. The human fleet pressed their advantage mercilessly, driving the Yara'th forces into the gravity well of Vesha Prime. Trapped between the relentless assault and the planet's pull, the alien ships were torn apart, their wreckage burning as it plummeted into the atmosphere. On the ground, Riker's Marines watched in awe as fiery debris streaked across the sky, the remnants of the enemy fleet consumed by the planet's gravity. "Look at that," one Marine muttered, grinning. "We got them on the run." Riker allowed himself a rare moment of relief, his chest heaving from exertion. "We're not done yet," he reminded his squad, though the corner of his mouth twitched in a small grin. "Let's make sure everyone gets out in one piece." The Marines continued their advance, sweeping the streets for any remaining Yara'th soldiers. But the enemy was broken, their will to fight shattered. Pockets of resistance surrendered or fled, leaving the city in the hands of the victorious Marines. Above them, the final battle played out in the depths of space. The last remnants of the Yara'th fleet, cornered and outgunned, fought with the desperation of the defeated. But the human fleet pressed forward, determined to end the threat once and for all. "Target their flagship," Voss ordered, her voice cold with resolve. "We take that out, and this war is over." The Resolute lined up for a final assault, its plasma cannons charging to full power. The enemy flagship, a monstrous vessel bristling with alien weaponry, loomed ahead, a symbol of Yara'th dominance that was about to be shattered. "Fire!" Voss commanded. The cannons roared, unleashing a devastating salvo that tore through the flagship's shields and ripped the ship apart from within. A massive explosion blossomed in the void, consuming the enemy vessel and scattering debris across the battlefield. Cheers erupted across the comm channels as the human fleet celebrated their hard-won victory. The Yara'th forces, leaderless and demoralized, scattered into the depths of space, their invasion crushed. On the ground, Riker's squad regrouped at the tunnel entrance, ensuring every civilian had made it safely inside. Exhausted but triumphant, the Marines exchanged weary smiles. "We did it," Riker said quietly, his gaze sweeping over the city they had fought to save. "We held the line." As the dust settled and the smoke cleared, the Marines gathered the last of the civilians, escorting them through the tunnels to safety. The city, though battered and scarred, stood as a testament to their resilience, a symbol of hope amid the darkness. Back on the Resolute, Voss leaned against the command console, her expression one of quiet satisfaction. They had faced impossible odds, but they had emerged victorious. And though the war was far from over, they had proven that humanity would not back down, not when lives were at stake. "Well fought, everyone," Voss said, her voice carrying over the comms. "Let's get our people home." With the Yara'th fleet shattered and the refugees safe, the battle for Veshar Prime was over. But as the human fleet regrouped and prepared for the next phase of the war, one thing was clear. This was only the beginning. Humanity had answered the call, and they weren't going anywhere. The aftermath of the battle left a profound impact on Veshar Prime. In the days following the defeat of the Yara'th forces, the once bustling cities were now scenes of both devastation and resilience. The surviving citizens began to emerge from the tunnels, their faces a mixture of relief and grief as they surveyed the damage to their homes. As the human Marines assisted in the relief efforts, a sense of camaraderie blossomed between the two species. Riker, now deeply involved in the reconstruction efforts, moved among the people, helping them salvage what remained of their lives. Children, once terrified and hollow-eyed, now laughed as Marines played with them, their innocence shining through the heavy atmosphere of loss. "Look at this!" a little girl exclaimed, holding up a small, intact toy, a delicate representation of a Yara'th creature carved from wood. Riker knelt down, smiling as he took the toy from her hands. "It's beautiful," he said, genuinely impressed. "You made this?" "Yes, it was my favorite," she replied, her voice proud, yet tinged with sadness. He handed it back, hoping it brought her comfort. "You'll make new ones, even better ones, and I'll bet they'll be even more fantastic when this place is rebuilt." The girl nodded, a shy smile breaking through her worry. As Riker stood, he caught sight of Lieutenant Hart, who was coordinating medical assistance for the injured. "Lieutenant, how are we holding up?" Riker asked, his expression serious. "We've managed to set up a triage station," Hart replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "The medics are doing everything they can, but we're short on supplies. I think we'll need to send a request to the Resolute for more medical kits." "Let's make it happen," Riker said, his determination solid. "We've got to take care of these people." Meanwhile, aboard the flagship Resolute, Admiral Voss surveyed the situation from the bridge. Reports flooded in detailing the successful evacuation of civilians and the ongoing efforts to secure the planet. While their victory over the Yara'th was monumental, she knew the war was far from over. "Commander Kane, what's the status of the fleet?" she asked, her voice firm. "We've sustained some damage, but nothing we can't handle," Kane reported. "The Yara'th forces have retreated, but intelligence suggests they may regroup and strike again. We need to prepare for their next move." Voss nodded, her thoughts racing. The Yara'th were relentless, and if they managed to regroup, they would not take their loss lightly. "Set a course for the nearest Yara'th colony," Voss ordered. "We need to gather intelligence and ensure they can't launch another attack. We must be proactive." As the fleet adjusted its position, Voss's thoughts turned to the people of Veshar Prime. They had suffered tremendously, and as they began to rebuild, they would need support, both logistical and moral. "Let's deploy humanitarian aid teams," she commanded. "We'll provide medical supplies, food, and whatever else they need. We can't let them feel abandoned after everything they've endured." The fleet buzzed with activity, and as supplies were dispatched, the Marines continued their ground operations. Riker and his squad joined forces with local engineers to begin assessing the damage to the infrastructure. "Get a team on that power grid," Riker directed, pointing toward a facility that had been heavily damaged in the fighting. "We need to restore electricity to the neighborhoods. It'll help morale." As the engineers set to work, Riker found himself reflecting on the bonds that had formed throughout this conflict. What had started as a desperate fight for survival had transformed into something greater, an alliance between humans and the people of Veshar Prime. "This isn't just about fighting anymore," Riker told his team as they surveyed the destruction. "It's about rebuilding, about standing together. We can't just save them. We need to support them." As days turned into weeks, progress was evident. With the assistance of the human fleet and their technology, Veshar Prime began to rise from the ashes. Buildings were rebuilt, streets cleared of debris, and markets reopened. Hope flickered back to life among the residents, who found strength in their unity with the human soldiers. In a moment of reflection, Riker found himself standing atop a hill overlooking the city. The sun set in brilliant hues, casting golden rays over the revitalized streets below. It was a sight to behold, a stark contrast to the chaos of only weeks ago. He pulled out his comm device and reached out to Voss. "Admiral, I wanted to take a moment to thank you for your support and the resources you've sent. The people here are beginning to heal, and it's largely due to your leadership." Voss's voice came through, warm yet commanding. "You're doing incredible work down there, Lieutenant. The strength of humanity lies in our ability to adapt and unite in the face of adversity. You're living that truth on Veshar Prime." As they spoke, Riker felt a sense of purpose wash over him. This conflict had changed them all, forged bonds that would last a lifetime. "Admiral, there's something I need to propose," Riker continued. "We've talked about continuing support, but I think we can establish a more formal alliance with the people of Veshar Prime. Military assistance, training programs, and cultural exchange. They've proven they can fight alongside us. Now let's help them build a stronger future." "Consider it done, Lieutenant," Voss replied, her tone resolute. "We'll set the groundwork for a lasting alliance. These people deserve more than just help. They deserve a partnership." As Riker hung up, he glanced back at the city, feeling a swell of pride. The camaraderie built in the heat of battle now had a purpose beyond mere survival. A few days later, a formal meeting was held in the central plaza of the rebuilt city, where leaders from Veshar Prime and the human fleet gathered to discuss the future. Riker stood among his comrades as Admiral Voss addressed the crowd. "Today marks a new beginning for us all," Voss announced, her voice echoing over the assembled crowd. "We are here not just as allies in war, but as partners in peace. Together, we will build a future free from tyranny, a future where our peoples thrive side by side." As the crowd erupted in applause, Riker felt a sense of hope that transcended the moment. They had faced overwhelming odds, but through courage, determination, and an unbreakable bond, they had emerged victorious. The cheers of the crowd mixed with the sounds of laughter and celebration. Children played in the streets, families reunited, and hope blossomed anew. As Riker looked around, he knew this was just the beginning. The Yara'th may have been defeated, but their fight for freedom would continue. And together, humanity and the people of Veshar Prime would face whatever challenges lay ahead, united by the strength they had found in one another. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with colors of hope, as Riker raised a glass in salute to the future they would build together. In that moment, he understood the true power of alliance and the resilience of the spirit. Desperate and alone, they had cried for help, and humanity had answered. Together, they would write the next chapter of their shared destiny.